wonderful to have you here today. And we've been talking this morning about bullying and harassment. And I'm thrilled that that's what you wanted to talk about today. It was like Vulcan mind meld that you knew and requested today. I want to talk about bullying. I was like, yay, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So
from a BCBA standpoint, I'm thrilled to hear your thoughts on this, because I know I have a lot of emotional responses as a parent. But I'm wanting to know from you what are your thoughts today about bullying and harassment?
Well, the reason that this came up was I was reading, there's a study, or not a study actually, just more like a report, a survey that was done by Kennedy Krieger, and they just recently released the results. And so I was just having a look at that, and it was really heartbreaking to me to read about it. I mean, we all know that bullying is a problem for our kids, but this just really puts it out there.
Yeah.
The results that they got were from a very specific group of parents that volunteered their information. So they kind of say themselves, we don't know how much we can generalize this, but basically what they found with the group of parents that they interviewed was that I think 60% or something, let me just check that number, 63% of the children with ASD had been bullied, compared to I think maybe 12% of the typical siblings of those kids. And that's just very
decimating. And we should back up for just a second and talk briefly about Kennedy Krieger and the Ian research. And
yes.
This is something that for you as parents, if you're interested in participating, the Ian research project allows you fill out a survey. My husband and I are on it, and we have an account for my son as well. It's free, and if you want to have input, they will send you surveys that are questionnaires that are appropriate for the things that you answered in your original profile.
Right.
And you can be a part of a huge experiment in research, because we know that we all have information, right? And we should be sharing it with each other, and that's part of what the Ian Project does. And so that's what this is coming from there.
Yeah, they have a website which we can find for you at the end of the show. We'll have Emily put it up.
I think it's just Ian.
I think it is.
Or Ian Project.
Ian Community, it is. IanCommunity.org.
Okay.
I believe.
There we go. And it does take a little bit of time to fill out the initial profile, but you can do it in spurts. And they don't harass you. There are lots of times when I am too busy, they'll send me a thing and I just don't have the time to fill it out, and they don't harass you and say, hey, you said you wanted to participate. They're very good about that. They understand that we all have a minimum amount of time. But you can go there to the website too, and it's the Interactive Autism Network. You can go there and they'll publish some of their different studies.
They're going to. I think right now with this stuff, they're just sharing the findings with with everybody, because obviously they want to show what your work, your input as parents is producing, but they're in the process of formulating some research that could be published.
Okay. So here we have, and they've asked questions about bullying, but high number for the kids who have an autism spectrum diagnosis as opposed to their siblings who don't.
And in particular the kids with Asperger's, they found were the most likely to be bullied. And there's lots of different reasons why that might be. They don't really know from this information yet, but it's stuff that they want to explore. I mean, it could be, one of the other things that they noticed was that children were more likely to be bullied if they were in a public school setting, whether that was special ed or just typical classrooms. So it may be that more Asperger's kids are in those kinds of settings, or it may be something to do with the particular deficits or skill, the types of things that kids with Asperger's are dealing with.
But it could also, what my fear is that on the spectrum, the kids with Asperger's are much more vocal. So maybe it's that they have the ability to report it, whereas the other kids we may not know.
It could be that too, exactly. So there's lots of different things. It might be to do with Asperger's itself, or it might be to do with the environment that they're in, and there's lots of things that could be going on.
Right. But already shocking, that this many of them are saying this is happening.
Yeah, it's really tragic. And so it's obviously a very common thing. And I don't want people to freak out about that, but just to be aware of it, even if you don't think that your child's having problems, just to be aware, because you may not always know, as Shannon just said.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important things is to make sure that you have maybe something in your child's IEP that has strategies and stuff, you know, precautions or whatever you want to call them, in there to help protect your child from bullying.
Yeah, and shocking that we would have to think in those terms. But, you know, and I've shared with you that I was always aware of the bullying thing and thought, this is shocking, this is terrible. We've had Jesse Saperstein on the show, that he is a wonderful, outspoken young adult who is jumping out of planes to draw attention to the fact that bullying is happening and that it shouldn't, and on this crusade. And I was listening to Jesse and going, oh, this is terrible, and I got to worry about this for later on, not knowing that my child was experiencing it in that moment. And that the way in which I found out that he was, it was just so shocking to me. But we're having to deal with this in 3rd grade. And what's been very eye-opening to me is that it isn't just one person's problem, right? The fact that a 3rd grader would say something really negative to my son, not only do I as a parent have a problem for my child, but I have a problem for that child too. Because in general, kids don't just start bullying unless they also have been bullied.
Yeah, that's very common. And bullies, is whether you're the victim or the bully, we know from other previous research that both the bullier and the victim tend to have certain problems, and they can both end up with, you know, mental health difficulties, or end up being victims themselves in some way, or, you know, they don't have good outcomes in school, and all these types of things that we know about both bullies and the victims. So both are victims in a way. And both kids are going to need help.
Yeah, I mean, that is a foreign concept to me. I really didn't look at it that way. When they would talk about somebody being bullied, I go, those terrible people, because they were these shadowy figures that were, I don't know, I thought of them all as about to be adults, and it was very easy for me to look at them and go, well, those are the terrible people. Now that it's happening, and these are children that I know, I can't be that black and white about it.
No, and actually one of the interesting findings of this survey was that a lot of the children with autism who are being bullied were also bullies. And that there's a variety of reasons why that could be happening. I mean, it could be to do with skill deficits, that the kids that are being bullied don't know how to interact appropriately, or they're reacting, or they're having their buttons pushed, or for whatever reason, there's different things going on. So it's good to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and of course that's one of my big fears, is that now as a result of what's happened, that, you know, and we've had a couple incidences recently at home where my son has said some things that were really not nice about other people, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned that that could happen. So tell us more about this, and then later on we're going to talk about what we can do
about it.
Yeah.
So I think we said, so the main findings were that children with Asperger's were the most likely to be bullied, but across the spectrum. Then also that more bullying, it seems to be happening in the public school setting rather than the private school setting, and there's like a variety of reasons of why that can be happening too. I mean, one of them could be that private schools tend to be smaller and more kind of insulated. The other things that they find was that a lot of the children who are being bullied were often bullies themselves. So children with autism are more likely to bully others. And what else? Oh, and I'm trying to find my other findings here.
That's okay. Take your time. But it's shocking.
There's a lot of things in this report.
Yes, there are, and I love all the graphs and all the information. It's so important, because keep in mind too, everybody, that this is what was reported by parents. So, you know, I think that there's probably a level of honesty, and for parents to have admitted that my child, not only is my child being bullied, but my child is also bullying, I think is an incredibly honest response. And I tend to really believe in that number. Because there was nothing to be benefited by that, but the parents did. So something important for us to pay attention to and be aware of.
And most of the bullying that was going on was more the psychological, well, they call it like psychological bullying, so like teasing, calling names, and also interestingly deliberately provoking the kids to, you know, pushing their buttons to see them have a meltdown or see them get really, really upset, which is just really tragic. But I guess some of the kids just find that amusing, or for whatever reason. So they're deliberately winding our kids up. And then the other thing that they noticed was what types of behaviours are most likely to result in bullying. And actually, it was interesting because it wasn't the repetitive stereotype.
Which is what we would assume, right?
Which is what I might have assumed that would be a problem. It was more, but again, we noted that the Asperger's children were more likely to be bullied. So I don't know if it's to do with maybe more outward behaviours don't cause the bullying as much, or if who knows. But the things that were the behaviours and traits that were most associated with being bullied were things like clumsiness and poor hygiene and like rigid rule following. So for example, enforcing adults' rules when the other kids weren't, that kind of thing.
Right.
Continuing to talk or perseverate on a topic that wasn't interesting to the other kids, or was weird, perceived as weird.
Which we just talked about, had a question or a comment from somebody that's working on that with their child.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very
okay.
interesting. And then kids who have frequent meltdowns and show a lot of inflexibility or rigidity. So those are the most likely things to cause bullying or to bring about bullying.
And isn't that interesting? Because a part of me as a parent goes, well, gosh, okay, those are things to target a little bit more so that they're less likely to be bullied. It brings up some anger because I want to go, well, I don't want to work on that because of this. But at the end of the day, it helps them to negotiate their world and be more social.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about this morning is really, unfortunately, we can do all the education and talk to these kids in classrooms as much, and we should do that, but ultimately we don't really have a lot of control over what other people do. And the things that we have best control over and the things we can change, the most easiest is to help our kids, is teach our kids skills, and maybe change some of the things that they're doing. Whether that seems like the right thing to do or not, that unfortunately that really is the best thing we can do.
And it does have other benefits, right? I mean, we can all admit that for our child to be able to not continue monologuing about a subject without checking in with other people, that helps them not just with bullies, but with making friends that are
and that's
willing.
really, really important because the kids who are able to make friends are much less likely to be bullied. So that is really important.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how we can target some of these things, and you'll tell us if there's other stuff within this huge study, this huge information here that you've got that we need to be aware of. So we're talking about bullying today, and I want to remind everybody, though, that at 11 o'clock, we're going to have Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson, and we're going to show you, we're going to end on a really good note and show you some wonderful families that we met at the Walk Now for Autism on Saturday. But we're coming back with Evelyn Gould and talking about bullying. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and our special guest today is Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA. That was our jargon term for today. It stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And we mentioned to you that all BCBA is not equal and even. Not everybody who's a BCBA has experience with autism, but Evelyn does have experience with autism. So when we were saying to you, find that right BCBA, Evelyn's exactly who we're talking about. And you're here with us talking about bullying today, which it's an emotional subject. I think
it really is.
I think it's one of those things that I certainly was feeling like, well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. I feel bad, but I only can deal with what I can deal with, and it, all of a sudden the bridge is here in my face. And it's overwhelming.
It is, and I think it's really important, though. It feels overwhelming, but it can be dealt with.
Yes.
So there is hope out there, and it's not an insurmountable problem. You can't do it on your own. I think you need to get help, and whether that's just involving the school and getting the school to work with you and putting in place stuff in the IEP and so on, or working with your behaviour analyst. It's really important that if you do have the luck of having a BCBA working with you and you have a program going on with your child, that if you become aware of a bullying problem, that you talk to them about it, because they can then help put in place specific targets and skills, work on specific skills that will help your child with dealing with bullies or preventing them from becoming bullied. So I think it's really important to share that, because the BCBA won't know about it unless you tell them it's happening.
Right.
Unless, of course, the BCBA is in contact a lot with the school and is maybe going into school.
Right.
You know, so definitely share that information. And if you don't know that your child is being bullied, but you're concerned that they might be a target, then again, like talking to your BCBA about it being a priority for you, and you're concerned about it, and ensuring that they then will work with you to help make sure that they put in place stuff that will hopefully help your child. Be able to make friends and become less likely to be bullied.
Yeah, and important, I think you just hit upon a topic that I want to talk about just briefly, is that, you know, we want to make sure that all the parties involved know what's happening, right? It's not something to be kept, you know, under a bushel. We want to make sure everybody knows what's happening. And there are things that, if it's happening at school, and we've been talking about this morning, a lot of times we assume students, but we're hearing more and more stories of where the bullying is coming from the staff, the teachers, and so on and so forth. A little bit different circumstances there, but the school needs to deal with it. And we talked earlier about what recourse parents and what to say so that schools will deal with it. But we can be dealing with it at home, and should be dealing with it at home as well.
Yeah, and just before we talk about dealing with it at home, there's several like different websites and things online where they even provide you, like one of the ones I saw yesterday, they have like templates for letters and stuff that you can send to your school, and ideas for IEPs and so on, and that all is there for you. There's people putting stuff there for you to help you.
Okay, so just Google templates for IEPs, or do you have the
particular website? I actually don't have the website written down here, but I can get it for Shannon, and then she can share it with everyone.
Fabulous.
I think it's the Bullying Project or something like that it's called. Awesome. Yeah, and it has like a whole host of resources for parents, for children, and for educators.
Great.
Yeah, it's got loads of stuff on there. It's really
fabulous. That's good to know. We'll have to get that website from you, because I want to know what it is.
I'm pretty sure it's called the Bullying Project or the Bully Project.com or something like that.
Okay. But important for us to target this at home.
Yeah, it's really important that within your child's program, there's programs that are going to work on skills that, for example, are going to help your child make friends, because then they're going to be less vulnerable. Yeah. So all types of things that could be from social skills to language skills to you know, the executive functions type stuff, like how to control stereotypy, like how to kind of monitor your own behaviour, and when it's appropriate to behave in some way and when it's not, and being aware of where you are and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, so important that we give our kids opportunities to make friends. I have to say that, you know, we asked a question about a month ago on the question of the day, and said, what do you do about your kids' friends? Do your kids' friends know that they have an autism spectrum diagnosis or not? And you know, some people wrote in and answered the question, but what was shocking to me was the number of people who wrote in and said, my child doesn't have friends, and that this is a really big problem for us, and we don't quite know what to do about it, and how devastating it is. And there are so many different ways that having a friend can help our children, that it's like we could talk about that the rest of the day. Yeah, peer skills. But you know, it does help them in terms of bullying, because first of all, if there's a group of kids that are together, they're less likely to be singled out for the bullying to start with. But even then, if they are singled out, the fact that there are other people who have the potential to speak up. We know that not always, you know, that somebody is brave enough to speak out, but there's at least the potential. Right, and the other thing is that we know from previous research that kids who are anxious or unhappy, mental health issues, or maybe have like other things, comorbid things like ADHD and so on, that those kids are really vulnerable to bullying. And so it makes sense to me that if we can help these kids make friends, they're probably going to be happier. Yeah. They're not going to be as anxious and so on, and then that way they're less vulnerable to bullying as well. Yeah. Yeah, so important. And I think, you know, there's so many different things that prevent our kids from being able to make friends, and we can like target all those individual behaviors. But I don't know, is it just me that I feel like part of the issue is finding the opportunity? Yeah, that is definitely a big problem. And, you know, I can't even think how many kids that I've worked with where we've been trying to work on peer skills, and it's been very, very difficult to get peers to come and practice these skills with. And it's really important, because you really need to have your kid practice them in that supportive environment where you can support your child and prompt them and help them through it, and in a safe kind of small group setting where you have control over what's happening. It's so important to do it there first before you kind of just throw your child into the lion's den, so to speak. You know?
Absolutely. And I think it's all too easy, and I say this all the time, even now that we're not having therapy, but when we were having therapy, I was like, well, we don't have time to do play dates because we're doing therapy, which was the thing that I would say and that I really believed, and somebody would point out to me, yes, but this is a part of your child's therapy, and it's the best time to work on it during therapy. And if you arrange the play date and have them come while the therapist is there, you're going to get more accomplished and it'll be easier for you. Yeah, it becomes a thing of picking the right family and the right kid.
That's also really hard.
It is. It's so hard, but it is surmountable. We can do it. One of the things that we did frequently was that there were some people, therapists and supervisors, who had children, so we would have them bring their child, to be able to work on something with my child before we brought in another child. But I think too, you guys, it's one of those things where you have to look at your resources. I'm always saying, figure out what your resources are, and if you have 3 good girlfriends that that you can say, they've said, what can I do for you? And you have to be willing to say, here it is. I need for you to bring your child over every Wednesday. And my child is not going to be perfect during that time, but that's the favor I need from you, is that you do that. And don't be afraid to ask. Yeah,
don't be afraid to ask. You will get some people who maybe aren't up for it and don't want to do it, because obviously you need to tell them, my therapist is going to be there. And that also means you kind of coming to terms with having to say, my child is needing help, and I'm trying to provide therapy for my child and help them with these skills. So that's hard.
It is.
Especially some parents find that very hard. And then also, other parents sometimes don't necessarily respond well. I've had parents who don't want their children to come over and play with this child because they don't want to be part of this therapy for whatever reason.
Right.
So it is a frustrating process, and it really can be.
Although I do know some people, and it depends on where you are with how open you want to be. There are some people who say, would you come over for a play date? Don't tell them, and say, my nanny will be here.
Yeah, that is.
And you and
definitely.
I can sit and have tea while my nanny plays with the children, and you don't tell them.
Yeah,
I think you have to figure out what's right for you. I could never do that because I can't lie well. I don't do well in terms of that. So I was just an open book that has its own ramifications.
And children don't lie well either. At that young age, I've had plenty of kids who've gone back to their parents and been like, or they, they're very suspicious, and they'll ask me a bunch of questions. Who are you? Why are you here?
Right.
And why are you doing that with them? And that kind of thing. That's kind of interesting. Kids are very nosy, and they don't lie well.
Yes, they don't. So, but there are ways around all of it. It is important.
And it is important to get the right peer too. That can also be frustrating, because you might have someone who's a child who's great and they're available and their parent has no problem with them coming over, but they're just not the right peer for your child for that particular skill or whatever you're working on. That's very frustrating.
There was one child in particular that the mom was always thrilled to bring their child. I have to be careful what I say.
I know.
always thrilled to bring their child to play, and loved the fact that the therapist was there, because their child had some real flexibility issues.
Yeah.
And so
it's very interesting when you're actually working with, when your kids are doing really well and you've been teaching them all these skills, and then the peers come over and you're like, oh my goodness, that child needs some.
Right. And so the mom loved that the child would come over, because because what would end up happening is that they would work on that child's flexibility. Well, for a period of time, that was really good for my son, that he saw what it was like when somebody else was having flexibility issues and had to problem solve, and they would work on it from that end. But it wasn't always, because it became a thing of, oh, okay, we got to do it his way. And eventually my son was saying, I don't want to do that anymore. Which in and of itself was a great lesson, because any time that we had to talk about when he was being that way afterwards, and I can say to him, remember how you felt when this child and you didn't want to play with him anymore, remember? And he go, oh yeah, I don't want to be that. But it's interesting how there will be some people who are like, yes, we want to come for the play date. And you'll be like, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I know. But the peer, you might find a peer who's absolutely brilliant and perfect and is great for everything, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And then, but maybe you can find certain things you can work on with certain peers, and then other peers you'll need other.
Yeah, it's just like certain friends. You're not going to go certain places with certain friends in your life, where other times you think, oh, the perfect person to take to this event is this.
And we forget that. We really do forget that. We just, I think, and teachers as well, like they just expect all kids to get on. It's like, go make friends, but it's just, the world isn't like that. You know, we don't all get on with all people in our lives, or we choose who we want. I mean, that's the nice thing about being an adult. You get to choose who you spend your time with, whereas when you're a child and you're in school, you're stuck with all these people and you just have to, you can't get away from them.
Yes. Yeah, really, really hard. And I think sometimes, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is somebody who was saying some of the things to my son that, you know, that he was taking in the way that he was, is actually having play dates with that person. So that they spend a little bit more time together, and sometimes that's not always going to be the RX for it, but sometimes that might be the thing to do.
It's this problem-solving process, like figuring out what you can fix, and what you can do, and where the problem is.
Okay, so play dates a really good thing, but there are other things that we can be working on too, that you know, to shore up self-esteem and those kinds of things. So let's take another little break, and we'll come back and talk about some of those things. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And our special guest, because it's Wednesday and it's the 10 o'clock hour, is Evelyn Gould. She is a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst with extensive experience in autism. And we're thrilled when you're here. I always say that the thing I like about you, I mean, there's so many things I like about you, Evelyn, but the thing that I'm always so excited about to talk to you about is that you always are willing to look at it and say, but the reality is this. And so that as parents, that we come into a situation and maybe the best possible thing to do is this, but the reality, you know, of getting bills in the mail and dinner in the oven and the toys picked up, you never forget that part of it. And I really appreciate that. It's so, I don't know what the word is. It's, I guess I feel freed to be somebody with faults, and not get it right and perfect all the time, and still come back and do the best that I can, instead of giving up and going, well, this is hard. So I really appreciate that. We've been talking about bullying, and we said that we were going to talk specifically, we're going to let you talk about some things that we can work on with our children to help them to be more social, to get along better, to make friends, so that they're going to be less likely to be bullied. Yeah,
and I think all these things also help prevent our kids from becoming bullies as well.
Good point.
So, I mean, some of the things are like, we need to teach our kids play skills, or like leisure skills that help them have shared interests with their peers. You know, it's great teaching your kid all these wonderful play skills, but what are their peers actually interested in? You know, one child that I worked with, he really loved to play, and we taught him these wonderful play skills, and he was amazing at imaginative kind of play with action figures and all this kind of thing. But then when I went to observe him in school, I saw him kind of being on his own quite a lot. And I realized, oh, you know, we haven't taught him probably what's of interest to his peers, and of course what his peers were interested in were playing like rough and tumble games, and also video games, just video games. And I realized that we'd worked on all these wonderful play skills, and he was very happy at home, this child, but he didn't know how to play video games. He didn't know how to talk about them, and so he was kind of at a very big disadvantage in terms of making friends, because he would ask his friends to play, but then they had no interest in playing with toys.
Right.
So we then had to go and teach him how to play football. We worked on teaching him how to play football, or soccer, you call it here. How to play soccer, and how to play video games, and how to talk about video games. And then he had a lot of much easier time, and then people wanted to come to play with him at his house. They asked him over because he got bought a video console or whatever, whereas before they just had no interest in coming to play with toys, which is quite sad, really, because
it is sad.
Kids, but that's just the reality of this of the situation in the world right now. That's what kids want to do.
Yeah, and it is sad, because I know so many parents who are so resistant and say, I don't want to do the video game thing, I want to hold off as long as I can, but you do get to the point where you go, oh, okay, it really makes a difference.
You know, if we want our kids to integrate with their peers and to have like a group of friends and a normal life, whatever that means, then we have to teach them all the same things that all their peers are doing and they're interested in. And give them the option of being able to join in with that.
And in the moment when you say, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to give some of my important therapy time to teaching my child how to play a video game seriously, how am I supposed to get excited about this? But when you see the far-reaching ramifications of it, that it means that your child is sitting and having a conversation with the child back and forth, being excited about that game, then you get it. Then you understand.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's some kids who do play video games and they really love them, but maybe they don't know how to do it appropriately, or it causes problems because they don't want to share, or they only want to play a particular game and that kind of thing. So again, we would have to work on teaching them some flexibility there and whatever it is that they need. So play skills are really important, and then obviously the social skills, like the conversation skills, teaching our kids how to have a back and forth conversation rather than just talking like monologues at people, which can be some problem, or teaching kids like how to talk about something of interest to their conversational partner, like how to ask questions. And you know, Shannon had talked to me about someone writing in saying they were really happy because they'd been trying to work on their kid only saying, you know, 4 things or something about something, and then handing the conversation over to the other person, or monitoring whether the person was interested, and if they were interested they were allowed to ask some more or tell them some more things, and if they weren't interested then they had to change the topic. And those are things that we do every day that seem really simple, but for our kids it's really hard because there's a lot of things involved, a lot of skills involved. So again, if you know, it depends what level your child's at, what you're going to be working on, but definitely kind of conversational interaction, socially type skills are very important.
Yeah, what's the name for, I can't think what the name is in ABA for when you notice the little things that people do.
Perspective taking?
No, when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're going and they're nodding and showing you that they're listening to the conversation. There's a phrase that's for that. I can't think what it is.
For like the, it's like conversational markers or something?
Yes, markers.
So yeah, we do that in skills. We teach kids to kind of acknowledge that they're interested, or at least appear interested, rather than just kind of staring at someone when they're talking. We teach them to do things like go, yes.
Right, and recognize it when other people are doing it too,
and
to see if they're into the conversation.
Exactly, recognize when to continue a conversation and when to kind of end a conversation, and then how to kind of mend a conversation when it's broken. So teaching our kids to notice when somebody doesn't have a clue what they're talking about, because that can happen where, you know, we have a child who will just start out of the blue talking about something, and the person who they're talking to is just kind of like looking really confused, like I don't know what you're saying. And so not only teaching our kids to recognize that, but you know, they need to know what to do about it.
Yes, how to repair the conversation.
How to repair the conversation. So that's definitely something we would work on. And that, you know, sometimes kids can appear as bullies because they don't know, because of these things. Like maybe they don't know how to ask someone to come and play, and maybe they're grabbing a toy off them, or they're grabbing the person, or you know, and it's perceived as bullying when really it's actually the child trying to initiate some interaction. They just don't know how to do it.
And sometimes inhibiting their responses to things because they'll see something happening and they just don't have the edit feature yet in place, so that they'll say something and call another child fat, or you know, or say something else that can be taken as bullying.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about that, because there's actually someone in Card right now working on a research project which is teaching white lies. So teaching kids to not say things, you know, so not that are going to upset people, and how to sort of tell white lies, which I think sometimes some people are like, why are you teaching your kids to lie? Actually, that happened at a conference when he was talking about this study, and somebody actually said, why are you teaching these kids to lie? And he was saying, and Jonathan was saying, well, it's very important that we teach our kids how to do everything, and that includes like being able to know when it's appropriate to lie, because the reality is we all lie in our lives every day.
It's a survival skill.
It is, and so we have to teach our kids how to do that, because it's not you're going to look pretty odd if you go through life and you just blurt the truth all the time.
Well, and I think how short-sighted of the person asking the question, because as a mom, I mean, there are people that I want my child to lie to. We teach our children to lie. If somebody comes up and says, you know, come and get in the car with me, my son has been taught to say, you know, my mom's right there, whether I am or not.
Exactly. So it could be a safety issue. It can also just be something as simple as like not giving away a surprise, you know, knowing not to give something away. Or if somebody, like a classic one I think of is when my mom used to yell at us because Granny would give us like something ridiculous, like a bar of soap for Christmas, and we'd be like, oh, what a bar of soap, you know. And my mum would be like, you have to, when your Granny gives you something, you have to say, thanks, that's really nice.
Yes.
Even if you don't like it.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So yeah, we need to teach our kids how to do all these things.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that Dr. Tarbox was there and answered that question, but it really makes me wonder about the person who had asked that. There are so many reasons why our kids need to be able to tell
I remember one kid that I worked with on the day that he told a lie. His parents, I came over to do some therapy, and the parents were just so excited, and they said that he'd lied at a party, a birthday party, I think, and he hadn't hidden it very well. I think maybe he'd eaten something that he wasn't supposed to, and he had like chocolate on his face or something. And they asked him about it, and he clearly was like, no, like obviously he had, but they were just absolutely ecstatic, and other people at the party were just like, your kid just lied to you, why are you so happy? But because they didn't understand what a big deal it was, and because there's so much involved in lying, you know, you need to be able to take these perspective taking skills that are so hard for our kids, so it was a massive milestone for them.
And also being able to think of all the things, you know, in terms of cognitive, think of all the things that are going to happen if you tell the truth and then you decide to tell the lie.
The perspective taking, understanding him knowing that his parents weren't there, so therefore they didn't see him eat it, so they probably don't know, so I might have a chance of telling. I mean, you know, it's very, very complex skill. It seems like a simple one, but it's actually, there's a huge amount of different cognitive stuff going on there.
And the whole decision-making coming behind cause and effect. Well, the first time that I ever saw Jem lie, you know, I'm very opposed to the whole gun thing. In fact, we don't even say gun in our house. For the longest time, we spelled it. And so there were no toy guns, and there, you know, nothing like that. And there's something, I swear, hormonal that happens in kids, and he would do anything to create a gun. He would chew his toast in the shape of a gun and be like, and I would go, where is he getting this from? Where on earth? Because, you know, we weren't watching anything like that on television, and I would be so upset about it. And then, of course, he got into Legos, and he would put together these creations for Legos, and then he, you know, there was one day that he made a rocket, because he's very interested in science and rockets and everything, and I was praising him and saying, I love your rocket, this is fabulous, this is wonderful. And then the next day he created this thing that suspiciously looked like a GUN. And I remember saying to him, is that a is that a gun? And he looked at it and looked at me and went, no, it's a rocket ship. And I was thrilled. I was trying very hard not to laugh and give it that kind of attention, but I was thrilled because he thought it through. He knew my preference. He knew that he'd been praised for that before, thought it through, knew the cause and effect, that if he said it was a gun, I was going to dismantle it. You know, it was really complicated what he did, and I hugged him and said, well, you have fun playing with that rocket ship. You know what I mean? It was great. Now we talk about when and how and who to lie to and not to lie to mom.
Yeah, and perspective-taking skills are so important when it comes to this kind of friendship thing and bullying thing, and teaching our kids how to think about what's interesting to other people, or why people are doing what they're doing, and what's going on in their heads, and what they know and what they don't know, and all these types of things.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit about self-esteem, though. Like, how do we work on self-esteem with children so that if somebody says, and part of what I have noticed is that my son came to me and said that somebody had said something to him, and my first reaction was, well, you know, somebody had said to him, you're stupid. And I said to him, well, you know, are you? And he was like, no, I know I'm really smart. And I said, well, then why are you believing him? And then everybody talked to me about the fact that don't minimize it, you know, but I want him to be in a place where somebody can say something to him and that he knows for himself who he is and where he is. But my gosh, he's 8. And, you know, I think all of us struggle with those kinds of things, right? I mean, I struggle with that. So why wouldn't how can I have these expectations for an 8-year-old? But more importantly, what kind of things can I do to shore him up so that he does have that inner knowledge and acceptance?
Well, we do all sorts of things. Like we work on assertiveness skills, for example, like teaching our kids what to do whenever someone, or when to notice when someone is maybe taking advantage of them, or when they need to be able to, so they can stand up for themselves. I'm not talking about retaliating or, hitting out or anything like that, but just simple assertiveness skills. So saying no when they don't want someone to do something, or somebody's trying to take something off them or something like that. Knowing like who to go to when something's happening. That kind of thing, like how to stand up for yourself.
Yeah. And reinforcing that when they do it.
Yeah.
Showing them, modeling it for them, prompting them to do it, and reinforcing them when they do it. Really important.
I mean, it's just a very individual thing, so it's hard to, you have to come at it at a way that's going to work for your child. Like Shannon was just telling me what was working for her son, but that might not work for another child, so you just have to figure out how to get on the child's level, whatever level they're at, and then creating a lot of opportunities for practice, basically.
Well, Evelyn, this has been so wonderful, and it's a conversation that I'm sure we're going to continue talking about bullying and how we can help our children. This shocking numbers and shocking stories in the media, and because it's not just children, we're seeing that it's teachers as well, which is really disappointing.
Yeah.
But there are things that we can do to help our children, and you're going to get me that website, the bullying.
Yes, the Bullying Project website.
Okay.